The Galactic Council had watched Earth for 300 years before humans finally left their tiny blue world and reached for the stars. They had cataloged humanity with the same clinical detachment they applied to every emerging species in the galaxy. Humans were clever but fragile, innovative but short-lived, curious but ultimately unremarkable in the grand tapestry of interstellar civilization. When the first human vessel crossed into Council-monitored space, the ancient races that governed the galaxy greeted them with polite condescension. Ambassador Elena Vasquez remembered that day with perfect clarity. She had been young then, barely 40 years old, standing aboard the diplomatic vessel Horizon as it docked with the massive Council station that orbited a dying star. The alien delegates had towered over her human delegation. The Rilkethi were covered in silver fur and moved with predatory grace that reminded her of wolves. The Veluxi were boneless creatures that flowed like living water through transparent suits. The Kethmari had 6 arms and compound eyes that tracked every movement with unsettling precision. And there were dozens more, representatives of species that had sailed between stars when humans were still learning to farm. They had smiled at humanity in their various alien ways and offered them a seat at the table, but it was a small seat. Positioned at the very edge of galactic society, humanity received observer status. Nothing more. They were granted access to a single star system on the outer rim, a collection of barren rocks that no other species wanted. The Council provided basic technology guides but withheld anything that might make humans competitive. They were being managed, Elena realized, contained like zoo animals who had learned an amusing trick. But humanity needed allies and humanity needed time, so Elena smiled her diplomatic smile and accepted the terms with grace. For 50 years, humans played the role assigned to them. They colonized their little corner of the galaxy with determined optimism. They traded their natural curiosity and adaptability for scraps of advanced knowledge. They asked polite questions and made themselves useful in small ways. Some Council members grew fond of the humans in the way one might grow fond of a particularly clever pet, the Rilkethi. Ambassador often remarked that humans were surprisingly pleasant company for such a primitive species. Elena had gritted her teeth and thanked him for the compliment. Then the Voltheri. Dominion decided that 50 years of peace was long enough. The Voltheri were insects. Or at least that was the closest human comparison. They stood 8 feet tall on 4 powerful legs, with armored carapaces that gleamed like polished obsidian. Their compound eyes saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. Their mandibles could crush steel, and their empire stretched across 200 star systems. Built on the broken shells of species they had devoured, the Voltheri had grown bored with council politics and endless debates. They wanted expansion, and they wanted blood. Human space sat on their border like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. The attack came without warning on a Tuesday morning. Earth's standard time, 12 human colony worlds burned simultaneously. Voltheri warships dropped from hyperspace and unleashed weapons that turned cities to glass. They broadcast the massacres on every frequency, ensuring that every human in the Zenzur galaxy could watch their people die. 3 million humans perished in 6 hours, men and women and children. Entire families erased between breakfast and lunch. The Voltheri Hive Admiral Kexton delivered a message to the survivors. Your species has been judged unworthy of continued existence. His translated voice buzzed across human communication. Networks, surrender your remaining worlds and we will grant you a quick extinction. Resist and we will make your end last for generations. Elena watched the broadcast from her office on the council station. She watched the footage of burning colonies and fleeing civilians and Voltheri soldiers hunting humans through ruined streets. Something cold settled into her chest. Something that felt like ice forming in her blood. The Galactic Council called an emergency session within hours. Elena walked into that chamber and faced the assembled representatives of 1,000 species. They offered humanity their deepest sympathies. They expressed profound regret at this tragedy, and then they advised immediate capitulation. The Valkyrie cannot be defeated. Councillor Thren of the Veluxy explained, his gelatinous body rippling with what passed for concern. They have never lost a war in their entire history. Your species is young, and your numbers are small. Surrender now, and perhaps they will spare some of your kind as servants. It is the logical course. The other council members nodded their various appendages in agreement. The Rilkathy ambassador looked at Elena with something like pity in his golden eyes. "We are truly sorry," he said softly. "But this is how the galaxy works. The strong consume the weak. It has always been thus." Elena stood in silence for a long moment. She thought about Earth and its green forests and blue oceans. She thought about her daughter who lived on Mars with her husband and their newborn son. She thought about 3 million people who would never see another sunrise. And she thought about something her grandmother had told her many years ago. A story about wolves and sheep and the thin line that separated them. When Elena finally spoke, her voice was steady and calm. "We decline your advice," she said. The council chamber fell silent. "Furthermore," Elena continued, "we wish to thank the Valkyrie Dominion for their actions today." Confused murmurs rippled through the assembly. Councillor Thren's body quivered with disbelief. "Thank them? Ambassador?" "I do not understand." Elena smiled then, a thin expression that contained no warmth whatsoever. The Rilkathy ambassador felt his fur rise along his spine in an instinctive response to something his conscious mind could not identify. "The Valkyrie have given humanity a gift," Elena explained. "They have reminded us of something we tried very hard to forget. They have reminded us of who we truly are." She turned and walked toward the chamber doors. "This council will receive no further requests for assistance from humanity. We will handle this matter ourselves." The doors closed behind her with a soft hiss in the silence that followed. The Rilkathy ambassador found himself trembling. He did not know why, but something in that human smile had triggered every predator warning. Instinct his species possessed, something ancient and terrible had awakened behind Elena Vasquez's eyes, and for the first time in his long life, the Rilkathy ambassador felt like prey. The news of the massacre spread across human space like fire through dry grass. Every colony, every station, every ship received the footage of burning worlds and dying civilians for one full day. Humanity fell silent. Parents held their children close, and wept. Veterans who had grown old in peacetime stared at screens with hollow eyes. Leaders who had spent their careers building diplomatic bridges found themselves without words. And then something strange began to happen on Earth. In the great cities that sprawled across every continent, people started gathering. They did not gather to mourn or to protest or to demand action from their governments. They gathered because something inside them needed to be near other humans. Factory workers stood shoulder to shoulder with corporate executives. Teachers clasped hands with soldiers. Scientists embraced artists, and in that shared silence, in that communion of grief and rage and something older than either, humanity remembered General Marcus Chen had commanded the colonial defense force for 20 years. He had trained soldiers and planned exercises and hoped with all his heart that he would never need to fight a real war. Now he stood before the Unified Human Defense Council. Representatives from every nation and colony brought together in 48 hours. Behind him, a holographic display showed the Valkyrie Dominion in all its terrible vastness. 200 star systems, trillions of insectoid soldiers, a war machine that had crushed entire civilizations. The Valkyrie made one critical error. Chun began, his voice carrying through the silent chamber. They looked at humanity and saw a primitive species. They saw our small numbers and our limited technology. They saw prey. He paused and let the word hang in the air. They should have studied our history more carefully. The display shifted to show Earth, beautiful and blue and ancient. 200,000 years ago, our ancestors lived in a world filled with predators. Lions and tigers and bears that could kill a human with a single swipe. Our ancestors had no claws, no fangs, no armor. They should have been easy prey. Images appeared of early humans, small and fragile looking against the massive beasts that shared their world. Instead, we hunted those predators to extinction. We did not hunt them because we were hungry. We hunted them because we refused to be prey. And we developed a method of hunting that no other species in the galaxy has ever evolved. Chum's eyes swept across the assembled leaders. We are persistence hunters. Our ancestors would track a gazelle across the African savanna. Not for hours, but for days. The gazelle was faster, but it could not run and cool itself at the same time. Our ancestors would follow their prey under the blazing sun, walking when the animal ran, jogging when it walked, never stopping, never resting until finally the gazelle's heart gave out from exhaustion and terror, until it simply lay down and let the hunters approach. The chamber was utterly silent. We are also pack hunters. Chum continued. We communicate, we coordinate, we work together in ways that seem almost telepathic to other species. A human hunting party is not a collection of individuals. It is a single organism with many bodies and one purpose. He turned back to the display of Velthri space. The Velthri think they are predators. They think we are prey. They are about to learn how wrong they are. Within weeks, the transformation was complete factories that had produced consumer goods retooled overnight too. Manufacture weapons and ships. Scientists who had spent careers on theoretical research began designing systems specifically intended to kill. Velthri volunteers flooded recruitment centers in numbers that overwhelmed the processing systems. But the change was not just industrial or military. The change was in the humans themselves. The Rilkethi ambassador noticed it first. During a routine diplomatic meeting, human body language had shifted in ways that were difficult to articulate there. Movements had become more economical, more purposeful. Their eyes tracked movement differently, always noting exits and potential threats, and their smiles had changed. Before, human smiles had been warm and open and genuine. Now they were practiced. Expressions that did not quite reach the eyes. Beneath those smiles lurked something patient and watchful. They are not the same species. They were a month ago. The Rilkethi ambassador reported to the council. Something has woken up inside them. Something they had buried under centuries of civilization. I do not know what to call it, but it frightens me. Councillor Thran dismissed these concerns. With a wave of his tentacles, they are simply posturing, he said, making a show of strength before they inevitably surrender. The Velthri have a fleet of 10,000 warships. Humanity has perhaps 300. The mathematics are clear. The Rilkethi ambassador wished he could share that confidence on the human colony world of New Helsinki. A young woman named Sarah Okonjo completed her training with the new Human Special Operations Division. She had been a schoolteacher before the war, gentle and patient with her students. Now she sat in a briefing room with 11 other volunteers, learning how to kill Velthri in ways that would haunt the survivors. Their instructor was an old man named Victor who had spent 40 years studying alien physiology. For purely academic reasons, the Velthri have two hearts, Victor explained, pointing to a holographic anatomy display, one in the thorax and one in the abdomen. Both must be destroyed within seconds of each other, or the backup system will keep them alive long enough to call for help. Sarah memorized every detail with the same focus she had once applied to lesson plans. She did not think about what she was learning. She did not allow herself to feel anything about the skill she was acquiring there would be time for feelings later. After the hunt was over across human space, millions of others underwent similar transformations. Accountants became logistics specialists, calculating supply chains for weapons and food. Musicians became communications experts, developing coded signals based on frequencies Valkyrie could not hear. Children drew pictures of human soldiers standing tall while Valkyrie burned, and everyone, from the oldest veteran to the youngest civilian, felt the same thing stirring in their blood. It had many names across human history: the berserker rage of the Vikings, the cold fury of the samurai, the terrible patience of the hunter, who has finally spotted his prey. General Chung gave it the simplest name. He called it being human. In his private quarters, he looked at a photograph of his wife and daughter, both killed in the initial attack. "We tried so hard to be civilized," he whispered to their smiling faces. "We built laws and institutions and ethics to keep the wolf chained, and it worked." For a while, but the Valkyrie broke the chain. He set the photograph aside and turned to the tactical displays that covered his walls. The hunt was about to begin. Hive Admiral Kex then waited for the human counterattack with growing impatience. His forces had fortified the border worlds closest to human space. 10,000 warships hung in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready. The greatest military force the Valkyrie Dominion had ever assembled stood prepared to crush the pathetic human resistance. But the humans did not come. Days passed. Then weeks. Kexthan's scouts reported no fleet movements, no military buildup, no sign of the expected assault. The humans had simply disappeared into their remaining territory, like animals retreating to their dens. Cowards. Kexthan buzzed to his subordinates. They know they cannot win, and so they hide. We will dig them out in time. He was wrong. The humans had not retreated. They had begun to hunt. The first sign of trouble came from a supply depot in the Valkyrie interior, 300 light years from the front lines. The depot serviced military vessels traveling to and from the border. One morning, the station's crew awoke to find their communication systems dead. Their fuel reserves had been contaminated with a compound that would destroy any engine it touched, and on the wall of the command center, someone had painted a single human handprint in red. No one had seen anything. No alarms had triggered. The humans had come and gone like ghosts over the following months. Similar incidents multiplied across Valkyrie space. Agricultural shipments vanished between stars. Communication relays went silent without explanation. Military outposts reported equipment failures that always seemed to strike the most critical systems. The attacks followed no pattern that Valkyrie strategists could identify. Sometimes weeks would pass without incident. Then 3 targets would be hit simultaneously, thousands of light years apart. The humans never engaged in direct combat. They struck and they vanished, leaving nothing behind but empty cargo holds and that haunting red handprint. Sarah Okonjo and her team were responsible for many of those handprints. Their ship was small, barely larger than a shuttle, designed for stealth rather than combat. They spent weeks at a time in the black spaces between stars, watching and waiting and learning. Sarah had discovered she had a talent for patience. She could sit motionless for hours, monitoring Valkyrie patrol patterns, noting the exact timing of shift changes and supply deliveries. When her team finally moved, they moved like water flowing through cracks in stone, inevitable, unstoppable, on one mission. They infiltrated a Valkyrie breeding facility and contaminated the nutrient pools. Thousands of Valkyrie eggs would fail to hatch, a loss that would not be discovered for months on another. They captured a Valkyrie communications officer and extracted detailed information about fleet movements before releasing him. They wanted the Valkyrie to know they could be reached anywhere they wanted them. Afraid, we are not fighting a war, Sarah explained to a new recruit. Wars have battles and front lines and clear objectives. This is something older. We are conducting a hunt. She showed the recruit a star map covered in red dots. Every attack teaches us something new about our prey, how they think, how they react, how they protect what they value. We are mapping their weaknesses the way our ancestors mapped the migration routes of the animals they hunted. The recruit looked at the map with wide eyes. How long will the hunt last? Sarah smiled. And there was no warmth in it. As long as it needs to, on the Galactic Council Station. The Rilkathi intelligence minister delivered a troubling report. The humans are not waging a conventional war. She told the assembled representatives they appear to be employing a strategy that has no equivalent in any species. Military doctrine. They are not trying to destroy the Velthari fleet or capture territory. They are trying to exhaust them. Counselor Thran rippled with skepticism. Exhaust them how? Psychologically and logistically, every attack forces the Velthari to respond. Every response costs resources and attention. The humans never give them time to rest or resupply properly. They are bleeding the Dominion slowly, like a predator harrying larger prey. She brought up historical files from human archives. I researched human hunting techniques extensively. Their ancestors employed something called persistence hunting. They would pursue prey animals for days without rest. Humans lack the speed of most predators, but they possess remarkable endurance. They can regulate their body temperature while running in ways other Earth mammals could not, so they would simply follow their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. The council chamber had grown very quiet. The Velthari have never faced this kind of enemy. The Rilkathi minister continued. They fight wars of overwhelming force. Quick and decisive, they do not know how to defend against an enemy that refuses to engage directly. That simply keeps coming and coming. That never stops. Surely the Velthari can adapt, Thran said. But his voice lacked conviction. Perhaps, but there is something else. The minister's ears flattened against her skull. Human agents have been appearing on worlds throughout the galaxy, speaking to species that have been conquered or threatened by the Dominion. They are gathering information and building networks of sympathizers. They are not asking for military assistance. They are asking questions. What kind of questions? Where do the Velthari feel safe? When do they let their guard down? What do they fear? The minister looked at the council with troubled eyes. The humans are studying their prey, and when they have learned everything they need to know, I believe they will strike with a precision and ferocity we cannot imagine. In his command ship at the border, Hive Admiral Kex then had begun to experience something unfamiliar. He slept poorly, every communication delay made him flinch. Every shadow in the corridor made his combat instincts flare, his soldiers reported. Similar symptoms, the constant vigilance was wearing on them in ways that Velthari discipline could not address. They had evolved as apex predators, feared by every species they encountered. They had no psychological framework for being hunted, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, the humans were watching, waiting one night. Kex then found himself standing at a viewport, staring out at the endless black. He thought about the human handprints that had appeared across his territory. They were marking their kills. He realized the way predators marked their territory, the way hunters marked their prey, for the first time in his 300 years of life. Hive Admiral Kex then understood what it felt like to be on the other side of the hunt, and he was afraid. 8 months into the war, the Velthari Dominion began to crack. The signs were subtle at first. Patrol ships that should have responded in minutes took hours to mobilize supply. Requests went unfulfilled due to shortages that should not have existed. Communication between commands grew confused and contradictory. Hive Admiral Kexton reviewed report after report with growing horror. His empire was falling apart from within. It was not one catastrophic blow that destroyed them. it was 1,000 small cuts, each one insignificant on its own, but together they bled. The Dominion dry military rations had been contaminated somewhere in the supply chain. His soldiers were weaker than they should have been. Their reflexes slowed by malnutrition. They did not even recognize fuel. Shipments had been delayed or destroyed so consistently that his reserve fleet could not operate at full capacity. Communication relays had been sabotaged in ways that made commands arrive seconds late, just long enough to cause confusion in battle. And worst of all, his soldiers had stopped sleeping. Every night brought rumors of human infiltrators. Every shadow might hide an assassin. Every closed door might conceal an enemy. The Velthari were predators, evolved to hunt and kill without mercy. They had no experience with fear, no psychological defenses against the terror of being stalked. Now the terror was destroying them more effectively than any weapon Kex then received. Reports of soldiers shooting at their own shadows, of commanders refusing to enter rooms that had not been checked, by a dozen guards, of entire bases falling into chaos because someone claimed to have seen a human. The whispers spread through the ranks like poison. The humans can walk through walls. They can become invisible. They do not need sleep or food. They are not truly alive, just spirits of vengeance. None of it was true. Of course, the humans were flesh and blood, as mortal as any species, but they had learned to move like ghosts, to strike without warning, to vanish without trace, and the Velthari imagination, starved for experience with fear, created monsters far worse than reality. Then the human fleet appeared. General Chun had spent 8 months building his forces in secret, while the small ship raiders bled the Dominion dry. The main fleet had grown and trained and prepared 3,000 warships, each one crewed by soldiers who had spent months studying every weakness the raiders had uncovered. They did not announce their presence with demands or ultimatums. They simply dropped out of hyperspace in 17 different locations simultaneously, striking military targets that the Velthari had believed were secret. Kex then received the reports with something approaching despair. The humans knew everything. They knew where his supply depots were hidden. They knew which commanders were competent and which were compromised by exhaustion. They knew the exact patrol schedules and response times of every defensive fleet. 8 months of patient observation had given them a map of every vulnerability. In his empire, the Battle of Keth Prime lasted 6 hours. Human forces struck with coordinated precision that seemed almost supernatural. Every attack exploited a weakness. Every maneuver anticipated a Velthari response. Ships that should have reinforced each other found themselves cut off and destroyed in detail. Commanders who tried to adapt found that the humans had already anticipated their adaptations. Kex then watched from his command ship as his defensive fleet crumbled. He ordered a retreat, then a counterattack, then another retreat. Nothing worked. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, striking at gaps in his defenses that should not have existed, vanishing before his forces could respond. His flagship shields failed after a sustained bombardment from 3 human destroyers. Fires burned on multiple decks. Half his command staff lay dead or dying around him, and through the smoke and chaos, a human voice crackled over the communication system. Hive Admiral Kexton. General Chun said calmly, "Your fleet is destroyed. Your empire is broken. This war is over." Kexton stared at the view screen, where the human flagship hung like a predator over wounded prey. "You have won nothing," he buzzed defiantly. "The Dominion will rebuild, we will return, and we will—" "No," Chun interrupted. "You will not." There was no anger in the human's voice, no triumph, no satisfaction, just cold certainty. "Your species made my people remember something we tried very hard to forget." Chun continued, For centuries, we buried the predator inside us. We built civilizations dedicated to controlling our darker impulses. We convinced ourselves that we had evolved beyond violence. A pause. You reminded us that we had not. You reminded us that beneath all our philosophy and art and kindness, we are still the species that hunted mammoths across frozen tundras. We are still the persistence hunters who would follow our prey until its heart burst from exhaustion. We are still the pack that pulls down creatures 10 times our size through coordination and endurance. Kekthon felt his legs weakening beneath him. He sank to the floor of his ruined bridge. We did not want to be this, Chun said. And for a moment, something almost like regret colored his voice. We built walls to keep the wolf contained. You tore those walls down. Sarah Okonjo stood on the bridge of her stealth ship, watching the Velthury command vessel burn. She thought about the schoolchildren she had taught before. The war, she thought about the faces of the Velthury soldiers she had killed over the past 8 months. She felt nothing. The hunt was not yet complete. There would be time for feelings later in the council chamber. The assembled representatives watched the battlefields in stunned silence. They had expected human defeat. They had expected to watch another species be consumed by the Velthury war machine. Instead, they watched the greatest military power in the galaxy crumble before an enemy 1/20th its size. How? Councillor Thren whispered, "How is this possible?" The Rilkathi ambassador shook her head slowly, because the Velthury did not understand what they were fighting. She said, "They thought humans were prey. They did not realize they were waking something far worse than themselves." On the view screen, the Velthury flagship broke apart under sustained fire. The hunt was almost over. The war ended not with a grand surrender ceremony, but with a quiet dissolution. Velthury worlds that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia simply stopped fighting. Their fleets scattered. Their soldiers laid down their weapons. Their government collapsed into chaos. Hive Admiral Kekthon was captured alive and brought before a human tribunal. He was tried for war crimes, found guilty, and executed with cold efficiency. There was no celebration among the humans who carried out the sentence, just a job completed. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address the aftermath. Ambassador Elena Vasquez represented humanity, just as she had on the day when everything changed. She looked older now, tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion, but her eyes were sharp and her voice was steady. "The Velthury Dominion has been disbanded," she announced to the assembly. "Their remaining worlds have been granted independence. Their military has been dismantled. The species that conquered 100 civilizations is now just another collection of planets, trying to rebuild." She paused to let the magnitude of this statement sink in. Humanity does not intend to occupy or colonize Velthury space. We do not want their worlds or their resources. We wanted only to ensure that they could never threaten another species again. The council members exchanged confused glances. This was not how conquerors behaved. "We will be returning to our territory," Vasquez continued. "We ask that the council grant us full membership status and representation appropriate to our demonstrated capabilities. In exchange, we offer our assistance in maintaining galactic peace." Councillor Thren found his voice. "You ask for nothing else, no reparations, no territory, no tribute." Vasquez shook her head. "We want only to live in peace with our neighbors. That is what we always wanted." The vote was unanimous. Humanity received full council membership with permanent consultation rights on all security matters. No species objected. No one wanted to risk becoming the next target of human attention. But the war's end was not what truly disturbed the galaxy. What disturbed them was what happened next, within months of the ceasefire. Humanity simply returned to normal. The factories that had produced weapons converted back to civilian manufacturing. The soldiers who had fought with such terrible effectiveness returned to their homes and families. The cold-eyed killers became Shopkeepers and teachers and artists again. Sara Akanjo went back to teaching elementary school. She stood before a classroom of children and helped them learn to read and count. She organized field trips and parent meetings and art projects. When her students asked about the war, she smiled and told them it was over, and they did not need to worry at night. Sometimes, she dreamed of the Valkyrie faces she had seen through her weapon sights, but the dreams came less frequently as the months passed. The predator inside her had gone back to sleep. The Rilkothi ambassador observed these changes with growing unease. She visited human worlds undercover, walking among the species that had just destroyed the galaxies. Great as military power, she found them laughing and arguing and falling in love. She found them creating art and building families and complaining about ordinary problems. They seemed genuinely happy, genuinely peaceful, genuinely kind. It made no sense. They switch it off. She reported to the council. The killing instinct, the hunter mentality, the cold focus they displayed during the war. They just put it away when they do not need it anymore. That should be reassuring. Thren said, "It terrifies me." The Rilkothi replied, "Do you understand what this means? They are not a warrior species that struggles to find peace. They are a peaceful species that can become warriors when threatened. The predator is not their true nature. It is a tool they can pick up and put down at will." She shuddered. "I have studied thousands of species across the galaxy. None of them can do this. Most species are either predators or prey, aggressive or passive. Humans are both. They contain the wolf and the shepherd in the same body, and they choose which one to be." Counselor Thren was silent for a long moment. "What do you recommend?" "Never threaten them. Never make them feel cornered. Never give them a reason to wake the wolf." She looked at the other council members. "Because if we do, they will hunt us the same way they hunted the Valkyrie, with patience and precision and absolutely no mercy. And then, when we are broken, they will simply go back to being friendly and curious and kind as if nothing happened." Ambassador Vasquez met with the Rilkothi ambassador privately after the session. They sat across from each other in a quiet room, sharing tea that Vasquez had brought from Earth. "You are afraid of us," Vasquez said gently. The Rilkothi's ears twitched. "I would be foolish not to be. May I tell you something honest?" The Rilkothi nodded. "We are afraid of ourselves too." Vasquez set down her teacup. "Humans spent thousands of years trying to control what we are. We built religions and laws and philosophies all designed to keep the predator chained. We taught our children that violence was wrong, that killing was shameful, that peace was the highest virtue." She smiled sadly. "We almost believed it ourselves. Then the Valkyrie came, and all those chains just snapped. 300 years of careful civilization. Dissolved in an instant, we became what our ancestors were. Hunters who would follow their prey to the end of the world. And now the chains are back in place. But they feel thinner than before. We know now that they can break. We know what we are capable of becoming." Vasquez looked at the Rilkothi with eyes that held both warmth and warning. "So yes, be careful with humanity. Not because we want to hurt you, but because we know how easily we could. We prefer peace." "Ambassador, we genuinely do. But if another species ever makes the same mistake the Valkyrie made, we will remember what we are." She stood and offered her hand in the human gesture of friendship. "We would very much like to be your friends. We think the galaxy would be a better place if all species could live together in harmony. But friendship requires respect, and respect requires understanding." The Rilkothi took her hand. "I think I understand," she said softly. "To you," Vasquez smiled, and for just a moment, something ancient and patient looked out from behind her eyes. "We are the species that hunted our predators to extinction. We are the pack that pulled down mammoths and saber-tooth tigers. We are persistent hunters who will follow our prey to the end of existence itself." Her grip tightened slightly. But we are also the species that tamed wolves and made them into dogs. We turned enemies into friends, predators into companions. We prefer that path, Ambassador, we truly do. She released the Rilkathi's hand. We hope the galaxy will never give us a reason to choose the other path again. The Rilkathi ambassador left that meeting with a new understanding of humanity. They were not monsters pretending to be civilized. They were a species that had looked into the darkness within themselves and chosen, deliberately and continuously, to be better. The wolf was always there, chained but aware, patient but ready, and the galaxy had learned, at terrible cost, that some prey should never be provoked. In the end, the Galactic Council implemented a new policy. It was never written down or officially acknowledged, but every species understood it. Humanity was to be treated with respect and friendship. Their requests were to be considered seriously. Their borders were to be honored, and under no circumstances, ever, was any species to give humanity a reason to remember what they truly were, because somewhere beneath the smiles and the kindness and the genuine warmth, the wolf waited patient, eternal, ready, and the galaxy was wise enough, finally, to let it sleep.